The lecture hall at the Galactic Military Academy fell silent as Professor Gray entered the room. His forearms moved smoothly as he arranged his teaching materials, each limb working with practiced precision. The old veteran's scales had lost their shine years ago, but his eyes remained sharp as he surveyed the class of 30 alien students before him. "Today," he announced, his voice carrying to the back of the room, "we begin our most important lesson in advanced warfare studies." He paused, looking at each student. Why one species is classified as too dangerous for standard galactic warfare. Blue, a tall student with crystalline skin that sparkled under the room's lights, looked up from his data pad with interest. Next to him, Stone, whose rocky exterior matched his name, shifted in his reinforced chair. At the front of the class, Leaf's plant-like tendrils curled with curiosity. Professor Gray activated the room's holographic system. An image of a blue and green planet appeared, spinning slowly in the air. "Earth," he said simply. "Home of the humans." A wave of whispers swept through the class. Blue raised one of his transparent hands. "Professor, there must be some mistake. Humans are a pre-spaceflight civilization. They haven't even colonized their own solar system properly." "Correct," Professor Gray nodded. "And yet, they are classified as Category 1 dangerous species. Your assignment is to find out why." Stone's gravelly voice rumbled through the room. "But Professor, I've seen their weapons. They still use chemical propellants and physical projectiles. Most of their vehicles can't even fly." Professor Gray's scales shifted color slightly, showing amusement. "Tell me, Stone, if you fought against a primitive species, would you expect them to turn your own plasma weapons against you within 3 days of first contact?" The room went quiet again. "Your task," Professor Gray continued, "is to work in teams of 3. You will research human warfare capabilities, analyze their threat level, and explain why standard combat protocols don't apply to them." He looked around the room. "Choose your teams wisely. This will count for half your final grade." Blue, Stone, and Leaf quickly found each other. They had worked together before, and their different species perspectives usually led to good results. As they gathered their things, Professor Gray approached their group. "Interesting combination," he said, looking at the trio. "Crystal, mineral, and plant. Good choices for analyzing unusual problems." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "A piece of advice. Don't start with their weapons. Start with their stories." Leaf's tendrils twisted in confusion. "Stories, Professor. We're studying warfare capabilities." "Sometimes," Professor Gray said, "the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the sharpest claws. It's the one that makes you afraid to enter the forest in the first place." With that cryptic remark, he walked away. In the Academy's study chamber later that day, the 3 students gathered around a research terminal. Blue's crystalline fingers moved across the interface, pulling up files on human warfare. "This is strange," he said, his transparent form refracting light as he moved. "Most of these files are restricted. I've never seen so many warning labels on military documents." Stone leaned forward, his rocky surface scraping slightly against the table. "Look at this one. Human combat psychology. Warning, level 3 clearance required." Leaf extended a tendril to point at another file. "Here's something we can access. First contact incident report. Should we start there?" They opened the file, and a video began playing. The footage showed a standard first contact situation. A galactic peacekeeping force approaching a primitive planet. Standard procedures, standard equipment, standard expectations. What wasn't standard was the outcome. As they watched, their expressions changed from curiosity to confusion, then to disbelief, and finally, the military archives were dark and quiet. Blue's crystalline body cast small rainbows on the walls as he moved through the narrow passages between data storage units. Behind him, Stone's heavy footsteps echoed softly, while Leaf's quiet rustling completed their group's strange symphony. "The older records should be this way," Blue said, pointing down a dimly lit corridor. "The archivist said the first contact war files are in Section A. They found the section they needed, and Stone used his natural strength to pull open the heavy security door. Inside, rows of data crystals glowed with stored information. "Look at this," Leaf said, tendrils extending to grab a crystal marked Human Resistance Tactics. The crystal slotted into their viewer, and a hologram sprang to life in front of them. The image showed a human settlement. Primitive buildings surrounded by simple defenses. A Galactic Standard Army unit was approaching with superior weapons and shields. It should have been an easy victory for the Galactic forces. It wasn't. "Wait," Blue said, leaning forward. Are they using their farming tools as weapons?" They watched as humans turned simple machines into deadly weapons. Harvest equipment became tanks. Transportation vehicles became mobile artillery. Even their primitive projectile weapons had been modified in ways that made no sense until they worked. Stone's rocky surface paled again. They're not just fighting. They're adapting. Every time our forces use a new tactic, they counter it within hours. The next file showed something even stranger. Leaf's tendrils curled in surprise as they watched humans using the environment itself as a weapon. "They're flooding their own lands," Blue noted, his crystal form shimmering with concern. "They're destroying their own resources to defeat the invaders." "Look at the date stamp," Stone pointed out. "This is just 3 days into the war. How did they develop these tactics so quickly?" Leaf accessed another file. This one marked Human Historical Analysis. Text scrolled across their viewer. Warning. Human warfare techniques show evidence of extensive pre-planning. Analysis suggests humans spend significant time imagining potential conflicts and developing countermeasures for hypothetical scenarios. They practice war in their minds, Blue said quietly. Even when they're at peace, they're thinking about how to fight better. The next file made them all pause. It showed humans fighting in conditions that should have been impossible. They kept fighting with broken bones, kept running with damaged limbs, kept attacking even when victory seemed impossible. "This doesn't make sense," Stone rumbled. "Their bodies are damaged. Their weapons are inferior. Their technology is primitive. They should stop." "But they don't stop," Leaf whispered. "Look at their eyes. Why do they look so happy when they're fighting?" Blue accessed another file, this one showing human guerrilla warfare tactics. They watched as humans disappeared into terrain, only to emerge where they weren't expected. They saw humans using simple tools to defeat complex weapons. They observed as humans turned their opponent's strength against them. "Professor Gray was right," Blue said. "We needed to see this. This isn't just about their weapons or technology." Stone nodded his rocky head. "It's about how they think, how they fight, how they never give up." Leaf's tendrils waved thoughtfully. "But we still don't understand why. Why do they fight like this? What makes them so different?" A new voice made them all jump. "Perhaps," Professor Gray said from the doorway, "you should look at their entertainment next." The 3 students turned to face their teacher, confusion clear on their very different faces. "Their entertainment?" Stone asked. Professor Gray's scales shifted to a knowing pattern. "Yes, humans have something they call action movies, and video games, and military science fiction." He paused. "They don't just practice war in their minds. They turn it into fun." As the professor left, the 3 students looked at each other, then back at their viewer. The image still showed humans fighting against impossible odds and winning. "Their entertainment," Blue said slowly. "They play at war for fun." And then Leaf added, "They use those games to win real wars." Stone reached for another data crystal. "We need to learn more." Above them, in the archive's ceiling window, Earth's sun continued to shine distantly, its light falling on students who were beginning to understand why humans were considered too dangerous for standard warfare. They weren't just good at fighting. They enjoyed it. The retired commander's office was located in the oldest part of the Galactic Military Academy. Commander White, a tall being made of swirling mist contained within a metallic frame, looked down at the 3 students sitting before his desk. "So," his voice echoed slightly, "you want to know about fighting humans." The mist within his frame darkened. I was there during the First Contact War. I saw things that still appear in my rest cycle visions. Blue, Stone, and Leaf exchanged glances. They had expected war stories. They hadn't expected their interview subject to sound afraid. "Tell us about their psychological warfare," Leaf asked gently, tendrils moving softly in the air. Commander White's misty form swirled faster. "Psychological warfare? No, you don't understand. All human warfare is psychological warfare." He moved to the window, looking out at the academy grounds. "Let me tell you about the Night Whispers incident." The commander activated a small hologram projector. "We had superior night vision, superior sensors, superior everything. We were hunting a group of humans through their dense forest vegetation. The hologram showed a heavily forested area. Then they started telling stories." Stone shifted in his reinforced chair. "Stories. During combat. Stories about things that lived in those woods. Ancient things, hungry things." The commander's mist turned darker. "They knew we were listening. They wanted us to hear. They told stories about creatures that hunted in the dark, that could possess your body, that could make you turn against your friends." Blue's crystalline form reflected the commander's swirling patterns. "But those were just stories, not real." "Of course they weren't real." Commander White's voice rose sharply. "But they knew our species could be influenced by strong thoughts and fears. They knew our telepathic sensitivities would pick up their focused terror. They weaponized their own imagination against us." Leaf's tendrils curled tight. "They used their own fear as a weapon. Worse." The commander's mist almost turned black. "They used our fear. Those stories. They stayed in our minds. Soldiers started seeing things in the dark, hearing things. The humans had created fear from nothing, and that fear spread through our forces like a virus." Stone's rocky surface scraped as he leaned forward. "What happened to your unit?" "We retreated. A superior force with superior technology. Retreating because of stories." Commander White turned back to them. "But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when we realized the humans were enjoying it." The commander played another hologram. It showed human soldiers around a fire, laughing, sharing more stories. They called it ghost stories. They'd been practicing this form of psychological warfare on each other for fun since they were children. Blue's crystalline form shimmered with understanding. "That's why they're so good at it. They practice on themselves first." "Exactly," Commander White said. "Every human child learns to create and face fear for entertainment. By the time they reach adulthood, they understand fear better than any species we've encountered. They know how to use it, how to resist it, how to spread it." Leaf accessed their datapad. "So when they fought us, they had an entire species worth of practice in psychological warfare." The commander finished. "Every scary story, every horror tale, every nightmare they'd ever shared, it all became a weapon." Stone's voice was quieter than usual. "Professor Gray told us to look at their entertainment. This is why, isn't it? Their fun teaches them how to fight." Commander White's misty form stabilized slightly. "Your professor is wise. Humans don't separate their entertainment from their warfare. Everything they do, everything they enjoy, can become a weapon." The 3 students stood to leave, but the commander had one last thing to say. "Remember this," his misty form swirled gently. "Humans don't just fight with their bodies or their weapons. They fight with their minds. And their minds." He paused. "Their minds never stop working, never stop imagining new ways to win." As they walked back across the academy grounds, the 3 students were unusually quiet. Above them, Earth's sun was setting, casting long shadows across the path. "Did you notice?" Blue finally asked. "When we walked in, we were thinking about human warfare. But now we're thinking about human imagination." Leaf finished. Stone looked up at the darkening sky. Maybe that's what makes them so dangerous. Not their weapons, but their ability to turn anything into a weapon, Blue said, even their own fears. They had learned something important about humans today, but somehow it only made them more mysterious and more frightening. The Academy's weapons laboratory was usually off-limits to students, but Professor Gray's authorization had gotten Blue, Stone, and Leaf special access. The lab's white walls were lined with displays showing weapons from across the galaxy. "Look at this," Leaf said, tendrils extending toward a display case. Inside was what appeared to be a primitive human cooking tool, a frying pan, according to the label. The lab's head researcher, Dr. Spark, a being made of pure energy contained in a special suit, floated over to them. Ah, yes, the cooking tool that took down a battle cruiser. Stone's rocky surface cracked slightly in surprise. A cooking tool destroyed a battle cruiser. How is that possible? Dr. Spark's energy form flickered with amusement. The humans had lost all their weapons in that battle. They were down to whatever they could find in their settlement. One of them threw this metal disc at our ship's sensor array. The energy being paused. They had noticed that the array vibrated at certain frequencies. The impact of this simple tool hit exactly the right frequency to shatter it. They destroyed advanced technology with cookware. Blue's crystal form sparkled with disbelief. "That's what makes humans dangerous," Dr. Spark said, moving to another display. "They don't think about what things are supposed to do. They think about what things can do." The next display showed a collection of simple human tools, farming equipment, construction tools, even children's toys. Each item had a red label detailing how humans had turned it into a weapon. "Look at this," Leaf said, reading one label. "They turned a cleaning chemical and sugar into an explosive. How did they even think of that?" Dr. Spark's energy swirled. Humans have a saying, "Necessity is the mother of invention." When they need something, they create it. When they can't create it, they adapt something else. Stone moved to another display, this one showing the human vehicle. "This looks like a simple transport machine." "Yes," Dr. Spark said, "until they filled it with explosive materials and drove it into our shield generator. They switched from driver to missile so quickly that our threat assessment systems didn't have time to recategorize the threat." Blue studied the wreckage. They sacrificed their own vehicle. They sacrifice anything if it gives them an advantage. Dr. Spark's energy form dimmed slightly. "That's why we can't give them advanced technology. They don't just use it. They take it apart, study it, and find ways to use it that we never imagined." The doctor led them to a secure room. Inside was a damaged Galactic standard plasma rifle. "Look at this weapon. When humans captured it, they had no idea how it worked. Within 3 days, they had not only figured it out, but had modified it to be more efficient." Leaf's tendrils curled thoughtfully. "They improved our own weapon." "They did more than that," Dr. Spark said. "They found a way to overload its power source to create makeshift explosives. They reversed its heat sink to create freezing weapons. They even used its power core to build improvised shields." Stone's rocky surface shifted uncomfortably. "But those modifications aren't in any combat manual. How do they know what to try?" "That's the problem." Dr. Spark's energy flickered. "Humans don't follow manuals. They experiment. They try impossible things. And sometimes, the impossible things work." Blue moved to the final display, showing a collection of primitive human communications devices. "These look harmless." "Those simple radio devices." Dr. Spark's energy form pulsed. "Humans used them to hack into our quantum communication networks. They didn't understand the technology, but they understood patterns. They found a way to use primitive signals to disrupt advanced systems." The 3 students were quiet for a moment, processing what they'd learned. "So," Leaf said finally, "humans don't just use weapons as weapons. Everything is a potential weapon to them." Stone finished. "Exactly," Dr. Spark said. "That's why they're classified as they are." It's not about their current technology level. It's about what they might do with any technology they get their hands on. As they left the lab, Blue looked at his notes. Professor Gray was right again. The danger isn't in their weapons. It's in their minds, Stone said. In how they think about weapons. Above them, Earth's sun was high in the sky, its light falling on the Academy's weapons collection. Somewhere in that direction was a planet full of beings who could turn anything into a weapon, even things that weren't supposed to be weapons at all. And they were still inventing new things every day. The Academy's Biological Research Center hummed with activity as Blue, Stone, and Leaf followed Dr. Rain, a liquid-based life form flowing gracefully through a transparent containment suit down a long corridor. You want to understand human physical capabilities. Dr. Rain's liquid form rippled. Let me show you something that will change how you think about endurance. They entered a room filled with holographic displays showing various alien species in combat situations. Dr. Rain flowed to a control panel and activated a specific recording. This is from an early encounter with humans. The doctor said, "Watch what happens when they're pursued by our fastest hunter species." The hologram showed a group of humans being chased by swift, four-legged alien predators. The aliens were clearly faster, more agile, and better adapted for the hunt. The hunters should win easily, Stone observed, his rocky surface reflecting the hologram's light. "Keep watching," Dr. Rain said quietly. Hours passed in the recording. The hunters were still chasing. The humans were still running. Slower, yes, but still moving. That's impossible. Blue's crystalline form shimmered with surprise. They should have collapsed from exhaustion. This chase, Dr. Rain's liquid form swirled, lasted for 3 days. The hunters collapsed first. Leaf's tendrils curled in confusion. But how? The hunters were superior in every way. Humans call it persistence hunting, Dr. Rain explained, flowing to another display. It's how they evolved. They're not the fastest, strongest, or most agile, but they can continue moving long after other species have to stop. The next display showed human biological data. Look at their cooling system, Dr. Rain indicated. They regulate temperature through sweating, releasing water through their skin. It lets them run for hours in hot conditions. But they're losing water, Stone said. Shouldn't that kill them? They can rehydrate on the move, Dr. Rain replied. Even more impressive, they can keep moving with broken bones, torn muscles, and severe injuries. Their bodies are designed to just keep going. Blue moved closer to the display. Is that why containment fails? They just don't stop. Exactly. Dr. Rain's liquid form darkened. Let me show you something else. The doctor activated another recording. This is from a prison break attempt. They watched as human prisoners continued fighting despite injuries that should have incapacitated them. One human was still fighting with a broken arm. Another kept running with a severely damaged leg. Their pain tolerance is remarkable, Leaf noted, tendrils waving anxiously. It's not just tolerance, Dr. Rain corrected. They can actually suppress pain through something called adrenaline. Their bodies produce chemicals that let them ignore injuries and continue fighting. Stone's rocky surface shifted. That's why standard containment doesn't work. We design cells based on what should physically stop a species. But humans exceed their own physical limitations. Blue finished. Dr. Rain flowed to a final display. Here's what makes them truly dangerous. Humans don't just endure. They get stronger from hardship. The display showed human muscle and bone structure. When they survive difficult conditions, their bodies adapt. They build stronger muscles, denser bones. What doesn't kill them literally makes them stronger. So when we try to wear them down, Leaf began. We're actually making them more dangerous, Dr. Rain confirmed. Their bodies treat every survival situation as training. The doctor's liquid form rippled thoughtfully. But the most frightening part, they pass these lessons on. Each generation of humans learns from the previous one's survival experiences. They're constantly getting better at enduring. As they left the research center, the three students were unusually quiet. "We've been thinking about this wrong," Blue finally said. "We thought their danger was in their weapons, their tactics, their psychology. But their greatest weapon is their own bodies," Stone added. "Their ability to just keep going." Leaf's tendrils move slowly. No wonder they never give up. Their entire species evolved to outlast their enemies. Above them, Earth's sun was beginning to set. Somewhere in that direction was a planet full of beings who could run for days, fight through devastating injuries, and grow stronger from every attempt to stop them. And they were teaching each other to be even better at it. Professor Gray was right again, Blue said softly. "The most dangerous predator isn't the one that kills you quickly. It's the one that never stops hunting you," Stone finished, looking up at the darkening sky with new understanding. The Academy's Strategic Analysis Center was eerily quiet as Blue, Stone, and Leaf sat watching historical footage with General Frost, whose ice crystal body glowed softly in the dim room. "You want to understand human determination." The general's voice crackled like breaking ice. "Watch this recording from the Battle of Last Hope." The hologram showed a small human settlement, surrounded by overwhelming alien forces. The humans were outnumbered 100 to 1, their defenses nearly destroyed. "By all military logic," General Frost said, "they should surrender. Watch what they do instead." The students watched as the humans received the surrender demand. The response made all three students shift uncomfortably. "They're laughing." Leaf's tendrils twisted in confusion. "Yes." General Frost's ice crystals dimmed, and then they sent back a message that our linguists still debate about. 2 words. "Come try." Blue's crystalline form sparkled with curiosity, but they had no chance of victory. Their defeat was certain. "That's where you're wrong," General Frost said. "Humans have a concept called spite. Sometimes they fight not to win, but to make sure their enemy loses too." The general activated another recording. This is what happened next. They watched as the humans triggered their settlement's power core, creating an explosion that destroyed not only themselves, but also a large portion of the attacking force. They sacrificed themselves. Stone's rocky surface paled. "They deny the enemy a victory," General Frost corrected. In their minds, that was a win. The next recording showed a different battle. A lone human ship faced against an entire fleet. "Watch the human vessel," General Frost instructed. By our calculations, they had 0.1% chance of survival. The human ship charged straight at the enemy fleet's command vessel. "Their transmissions at this moment are interesting," the general said. They were playing something called music. Happy music. They were celebrating their own doom. Leaf's tendrils curled tight. "But why? Why fight when you can't win?" "Because humans don't believe in no-win scenarios," General Frost's ice body crackled. "They have a saying, where there's a will, there's a way. If they can't find a way, they make one." The general showed them more footage. Humans fighting in impossible conditions, refusing to surrender even when offered generous terms, continuing to resist long after any other species would have given up. "Look at their victory celebrations," General Frost pointed out. A new hologram showed humans cheering after a battle. "Notice anything strange?" Blue studied the image. "They're injured, badly injured, but they're smiling." "Humans take pride in their scars," the general explained. "Each scar is a story of survival, of determination. They wear their pain like medals." Stone's voice rumbled softly. "Is that why standard intimidation tactics don't work?" "Exactly," General Frost said. "Threats don't scare humans. They make them angry. And angry humans are even more dangerous than regular humans." The general's ice form shifted to display another recording. "This is perhaps the most frightening aspect of human determination. Watch what happens when we captured their young." The students watched as adult humans became something else entirely, their movements more precise, their attacks more vicious, their determination absolute. They have a term, General Frost said quietly. Mama Bear. It refers to how their parental units respond to threats against their offspring. Nothing stops them. Nothing deters them. They will tear apart entire armies to protect their young. Leaf's tendrils waved nervously, so threatening their families. Is the last mistake an enemy ever makes, the general finished. As they left the strategic center, the three students found themselves processing what they'd learned. It's not just that they don't give up, Blue said thoughtfully. It's that the worse things get, the harder they fight. Stone nodded his rocky head. They turned desperation into determination, and determination into weapons, Leaf added. Above them, Earth's sun hung low in the sky. Somewhere in that direction was a planet full of beings who didn't just fight to win. They fought because it was who they were. Now we understand, Blue said quietly. It's not that they can't be beaten. It's that the cost of beating them is too high, Stone finished, because they'll make sure of it. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, they could almost hear human laughter, the sound of beings who had turned determination itself into their greatest weapon. The lecture hall was packed, not just with students from their class, but with officers, researchers, and even a few military commanders. Blue, Stone, and Leaf stood before them, ready to present their findings on why humans were classified as too dangerous for galactic warfare. Professor Gray sat in the front row, his scales shifting with interest. Behind him, Commander White's misty form swirled gently, while Dr. Sparks' energy glowed and General Frost's ice crystals sparkled in anticipation. Blue stepped forward first, his crystalline form catching the light. We started this research thinking we would study human weapons, he began. We were wrong. Humans themselves are the weapon. Stone moved to the display controls, his rocky form casting long shadows. The first hologram appeared, showing human adaptability in combat. Look at this standard combat robot, Stone said, pointing to the image. Designed to be unstoppable. The humans stopped it with cooking tools and cleaning supplies. When we gave them nothing to work with, they turned nothing into weapons. Leaf's tendrils activated the next display, showing human psychological warfare tactics. They don't just fight with their bodies, Leaf explained. They fight with their minds. They turned their own fears into weapons. They made their stories into psychological warfare. Every ghost tale, every horror story, every nightmare they shared became a tool to break their enemy's will. Blue changed the display to show human physical capabilities. Their bodies defy standard biological limits, he continued. They don't stop when they should stop. They don't break when they should break. And when we try to wear them down. He paused. They get stronger. Stone activated the next hologram, showing humans fighting in impossible conditions. They have a concept called spite, he explained, his gravelly voice carrying across the silent hall. Sometimes they fight not to win, but to make sure everyone loses. How do you defeat an enemy who sees their own destruction as an acceptable victory? Leaf moved to the center stage, tendrils waving gently. But the most dangerous thing about humans isn't their adaptability, their psychology, their endurance, or even their spite, Leaf said. It's how they learn. The final display showed human knowledge transmission. Their books, their movies, their games, their stories. Every battle they survive, they study. Blue explained. Every tactic that works, they improve. Every strategy that fails, they fix. They turn their entertainment into combat training, their stories into battle plans, their games into war simulations. Stone's rocky surface shifted as he delivered the key point. We classify humans as too dangerous for standard warfare, not because they can't be beaten, he said, but because the cost of victory would be too high. They would learn from every defeat. They would adapt to every strategy. They would come back stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than before. Leaf's tendrils moved purposefully as she activated the final hologram, showing Earth. This is why humans are classified as they are, Leaf concluded. Not because of what they are now, but because of what they could become. Every conflict makes them stronger. Every challenge makes them more innovative. Every attempt to contain them teaches them new ways to break free. Blue stepped forward for their final point. The galactic classification system isn't protecting us from humans, he said quietly. It's protecting us from what humans would become if we went to war with them. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then Professor Gray stood up, his scales showing a pattern none of the students had seen before. An excellent analysis, he said. But there's one thing you haven't mentioned. He moved to join them on stage. Humans make the most dangerous enemies, but they also make the most valuable allies. The professor's scales shifted to show communication patterns. That's why we maintain peace with Earth, he revealed. Not just because they're too dangerous to fight, but because their determination, their innovation, their adaptability, all the things that make them dangerous, also make them the greatest allies any species could have. As the hall erupted in discussion, the three students looked at each other, then up at the ceiling window where Earth's sun shone brightly. They had started this project trying to understand why humans were too dangerous for galactic warfare. They ended it understanding something far more important. Sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy could also be its greatest hope for peace. Because humans didn't just excel at war, they excelled at everything they set their minds to, including, thankfully, peace.